Hello, everybody, and welcome to this inclusively episode. Today, we're going to talk to Rachel Collins, Head of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Colt. And with me, I have my usual partner in crime, Chris Lewis, the founding director at Lewis Insight. Um, as always, we have these events to talk about how we can drive the wireless and telecoms market to be more inclusive. And this means people with disability, people that are prevented to access, to have the connectivity that they need, elderly people, anything. And at some point, sooner or later in life, we're all excluded, and so or we have a risk of being excluded, and we want to make sure that that's no longer the case. After this event, we will have more, but I would like to also let you know that we will be at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona on the 25th of February, and we're going to be at the MEF event. And more information about that is on the Inclusively webpage, that where you can find all the information, so you can sign up and meet us in person there. Now, with that, I would like to ask Chris to introduce today's topic and guest.
Thank you, Monica.
Chris.
Yeah, it's great that as we keep building more and more perspectives on this and talk about MEF, we'll certainly look at that issue around. We did a panel at MEF, the Omnichannel event, a couple of weeks ago, and we'll get that summarized and sent out, and you'll be able to catch up with that quite soon as well. But yes, Rachel, welcome to Inclusively. And
hello.
And I know we know something about Colt, but perhaps not everyone knows about Colt. So can you give us a bit of a background on yourself, on Colt, and your role within Colt?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Rachel Collins, and I'm head of diversity, equity, and inclusion at Colt. Colt is a B2B connectivity organization. We are global. I have been part of the organization for 12 years. Started out working in the Marcoms team. I was focused on internal comms and engagement. In terms of my current role, I started doing it unofficially 6 years ago and more officially 4 years ago. I think with a lot of people in the DEI space, well, there's lots of people who find themselves following various routes, but I was doing DEI work extra to my day role, my day job, and found that I had a passion for it. Well, I already knew I had a passion for it, but found as well that I was able to drive change, and it went from there. So yeah.
Interesting, you use the term DEI. We as a telecom industry, we are obsessed with our acronyms, aren't we?
Oh gosh, yeah, we are.
How well known would you say is the term DEI? Because I hear it called EDI. Is it part of CSR? It's part of ESG. Is it well understood within Colt? And when you're talking to your peers in different organizations, do you come across that? That's obviously your accepted term, but
yeah,
is there confusion out there in the market?
I personally wouldn't say that there's loads of confusion. I think the term DEI is well understood. Within Colt, we sometimes refer to inclusion and diversity, as a more of a shorthand, and rather than including the equity. So we talk about inclusion and diversity a lot. I network a lot with people doing similar roles to me, and it's quite often DEI. Sometimes it's EDI, and they lead with the equity. I've found that more in the US, broadly speaking, but yeah, I would say it's fairly well understood. Yeah.
That's really interesting, the geographic difference.
May I ask a question? What about the equity? Because we focus, Chris and I focus on diversity and inclusion, but equity is also a very important equity and equality as well. How do you define that? Or do you have a definition for that?
Yeah, I do. So we've started to talk about equity more within Colt over the past year. And what we mean by that is, equality is about treating everybody equally. Equity is about treating everybody fairly, but not necessarily, it's not always equally. It's based on what they might need. So people have different starting levels, starting positions, people have different needs. And actually, if you treat everyone exactly the same, that might not lead to equal opportunities in and of itself. Equity is about making sure that there's equal opportunity, and actually, removing barriers and supporting people.
I really like that, because that's, in the world of disability, you talk about reasonable adjustment for people. So that is exactly that, isn't it? It's understanding the level and making reasonable adjustment to accommodate people for. Oh, good, excellent. So that plus a geographic distinction, I think, is really, really interesting. One thing which is always evident when we talk about Colt is leadership, and Kerry Gilder, the CEO, since she came and took on the role, she's really gone for this, even the broader topic. But can you describe for the inclusively listeners and watchers, how Kerry drives this from the top? So we even entitled the session, driving it from the top, and that's very much with Kerry in mind.
So at the point where I officially took on the role of head of DEI at Colt, it was around the same time as well that Kerry became CEO, and actually it was absolutely fantastic from my perspective. She's passionate about this. She drives it from the top because she role models it. She talks about it a lot. It's very clear, spending any time with Kerry, that she cares about this because she just talks about it a lot. It's a consideration for her. How can we make sure that we're being inclusive? How can we make sure that this stays top of mind? Anyone who knows Kerry knows that she's constantly fizzing with ideas. She has that real kind of change maker energy where she's constantly fizzing with ideas and wanting to drive action. And definitely with DEI, that's the case.
Yes, if I often go back to her presentation of the DTW event for TM Forum in Copenhagen, and she made this presentation, and she was talking about how many paper towels get used. And I'm then going to the bathroom and going, I'm going to shake my hands dry. I'm not going to use any paper towels. We use too many paper towels. So yeah, she uses the platform brilliantly to do that. And then I guess in most of the inclusivity stuff that we're doing, we have two sides to it. We have the internal diversity of employment, and then we have the external customer facing. Can you give us a bit of color on that on both sides, or start with the internal perhaps?
Well, from an internal perspective, we've done a lot, I think, in a short space of time. Going back 4 to 6 years ago when we started working on this, we were quite initiative driven. And launching a global holistic strategy was a priority. So, 4 years ago, we launched that. And actually, I'm not saying that we never drive initiatives. We absolutely do. But it's all about creating that framework and building inclusion into the way that we do things. So from an internal perspective, it's about building inclusion, building equity into the way that we do things. So inclusion by design it is the approach. So our policies, our people processes, and the accessibility that I know that we wanted to talk about today, building accessibility in right from the start. It's not a patch, it's how we do things. It's part of the success criteria at the start. So and from an external perspective, we believe I think it's absolutely fundamental to the Colt philosophy and approach to DEI is that you can't do it alone. No organization, a lot of the time, we're talking about societal issues, societal environment, and we need to work with others in order to drive change. One company on its own can't tackle it. And actually, the best way to drive sustainable change is in partnership. And we do that in formal and informal ways. You know, we work with our suppliers, we work with our technology partners, we talk to our customers about this. And sometimes it's in a more formal kind of programmatic sense that we partner up on this work, and at other times it's more informal, but it's still happening all the time. You know, sharing best practice, being part of forums, finding out what others are doing, and seeing if we can link up. So we've done that a lot on the accessibility side. We've also done a piece of work this year partnering on transgender inclusion with other tech organizations. We're working with other organizations in the neurodiversity space to understand more about that. Again, that links with the accessibility piece as well. So yeah, you can't do this as alone as an organization.
Do you think it helps?
Go ahead.
Monica. No, please
Okay.
go on.
So when you talk about the internal part, clearly it's important to have something, you know, coming from the top, because then you provide the sort of the framework. But at the same time, you also need the buy-in from everybody in the company, or most of them. And in a lot of cases, that's a new concept. So it's not necessarily that they have prejudice, but they're just not used to think about it that way. So how did you find buy-in from the people working at Colt? And how did you foster, how did you send the message to everybody?
Well, I mean, back when we very first launched the strategy, it was something that we took a lot of time to raise awareness and educate. This is about culture change. So, you know, sometimes people think about inclusion and diversity work as, you know, it's things that you do to support specific groups. And actually, there is an element of that, but everybody plays a part in being inclusive. It's about behaviors. It's about being consciously inclusive, because if you're not consciously inclusive, then you could be subconsciously or unconsciously exclusive. So there's definitely a message here about everybody is responsible, everybody needs to be involved, and everyone plays a part. And educating on that and raising awareness is key. So we did a lot of going out and talking to the business about this from a global perspective, but also linking in with specific teams, talking about what it means to specific teams. You know, what does this mean for you, your organization or your function? Storytelling is really key, and this is something that Kerry is phenomenal at. So Kerry's great at using storytelling to get a message across and really connect with people. So, you know, the paper towels is a great example, but there's lots of examples that she uses. You know, she'll use examples from her own life where you know, inclusion has become top of mind, or to illustrate inclusive behaviors. And we play with that a lot at Colt. We get leaders to role model and story tell. We get peers. There's a lot of peer-to-peer storytelling. So one of the things that we've been doing this year is people have been taking the allyship pledge. We've been explaining what we mean by allyship, because allyship is a term that lots of people use, and our different employee networks were using it, but maybe in slightly different ways. And we thought we really need to explain what we mean by allyship. It's inclusion in action in many ways. But we're asking people to take the allyship pledge and pick one of the behaviors or traits that people want to really focus on. And it's gone viral throughout the organization, because we get people to then nominate somebody else to do that, and we do it all on our Facebook Workplace tool. We've had, you know, since the summer, we've had over 500 people do this. And, you know, the next step is really sharing those examples of where people have done it even more so, where people have been actively listening or gone out of their way to learn more, and all of those great behaviors that lead to a more inclusive organization. So
yeah, can you tell us for some of the people who might not know what the allyship pledge? Sorry.
How do you define it?
sorry, what's the question again?
How do you define allyship? Yeah.
So allyship is about being actively inclusive, and actually just saying that you're an ally is not allyship. You actually have to be doing something, and in many ways you have to be vulnerable and be able to show that you're learning and taking a risk. It's not allyship if there's it's about standing up for somebody, or a group of people who may be underrepresented within the workforce, or may be subject to discrimination, for example. But I would also say it's more than that. It's about inclusive behaviors, and it's about being actively inclusive. But just saying that I'm an ally, that isn't enough. It's about what are you doing to role model that.
Oh, great. Yeah, no, so I think it's really important. And listening to your previous answer, you talked about the framework. And it's interesting, when we had the Royal College of Art talking recently, they said often it's not about the actual design, it's about the framework within which you think about something.
Yeah.
And I think it is, so giving someone it's not necessarily painting them a picture, but it's actually saying, hey, look, this is the big context and this is why it's important. Do you think that, Colt is a relatively young company compared to the big incumbent telcos, certainly, and its ownership structure is different because of the fidelity as your parent, and I guess the age profile is probably younger. How do you think those things contribute to being able to push the message through? Because I think in some of the bigger corporates, bigger telcos, where they've been the former incumbent PTTs, they've got bureaucratic structures that things struggle to get through. Does that help you with the messaging and getting the things moving?
I think it does help. It's a relatively flat structure. I think at Colt it's very collaborative as a culture. Everyone's voice is heard, really. So I think that helps, and I think we've been able to be quite agile in terms of our approach to this. And yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that we've got it perfect and we've still got a ways to go, but I think definitely the culture was already there as being quite an open culture.
And do you see any?
So that helps.
Yeah, did you see any difference for different parts of the company in different countries or different groups? I mean, is it somebody more receptive than others?
Yeah, definitely, and that's going to be the same in all organizations. You'll get pockets of organizations where where the geographic landscape where a lot of the team is based is slightly different, so that the conversation with regards to inclusion and diversity might be slightly different. But I would say in Colt, generally speaking, even though we are global, we're not huge. So most people in some organizations, you have to be really senior to be talking to colleagues every day in a different geographic location, or do a really key specific role. That's not really the case in Colt. We're constantly talking to people from different locations all the time. And I think that helps as well. So it helps the cross-pollination of ideas. It helps people to, we've always talked about the importance of cultural intelligence in Colt, for the whole 12 years I've been here. So, yeah, I think it's the foundation was already there to some degree, which helps.
And what about with obviously you've recently closed the deal with Lumin, and to having acquired their European assets. Does that any obviously you can't comment on Lumen's culture, but trying to make sure you now spread the Colt culture to include all that, is that how's that kicked off? Is that something? I assume it's been well received, because it's an obviously it creates, you've got to be inclusive of those guys as well, haven't you?
Yeah, exactly. My impression, I met some of the Lumen champions, and met people who were involved in the employee networks, their side, a couple of weeks before the acquisition, and was just really struck by there was so much alignment, really, in terms of the way that they were talking about diversity and inclusion, compared to how we talk about it in Colt. There was so much common ground, and we've just been able to build on that commonality so far. So yeah, we're about 6 weeks in, I think, but we've done a lot of we've held discovery sessions with our new employees who have been involved in diversity and inclusion, and really work to find that common ground so that we've got that as a basis to build upon. And I'm just super excited, because it means that now we've got more passionate champions of diversity and inclusion. It's something that I'm really excited for next year.
Great. I want to change direction a little bit, and you mentioned accessibility, and obviously it means many different things to many people. As a blind man, I have a very specific requirement on accessibility. Yeah. How accessible have you made both your internal systems, processes, and I guess my pet hate, of course, is websites and applications that could get face out to customers. So any comments on the accessibility journey from those different perspectives?
Oh, absolutely. So we launched our accessibility roadmap, which is a 5-year journey to improve accessibility at Colt. We launched in May this year, and that was the culmination of months and months of work. So towards the end of 21, start of 22, we started to work on our roadmap. And what we did in 2022 was we partnered with Atos, who is a tech partner. They have a fantastic accessibility function led by Neil Milliken, and we knew that we had some enthusiastic champions with regards to accessibility at Colt, and people that cared about this. But there wasn't really, again, going back to that framework, there wasn't the governance and strategy around it. And we wanted to make sure that we put something around it that was sustainable, rather than just going after initiatives. And so we did a maturity modeling exercise with the Atos team. We included 30 stakeholders from around the business. So we were looking at this from the employee experience perspective, customer experience, our brand, how we communicate, how we procure, are we procuring accessible goods and services, awareness and skills. So we had about 10 hours of workshops to really understand, how accessible we were as an organization at that point, and where the gap was. That was such an interesting piece of work to lead on, and it was great to work with Atos, who were experts in this. I mean, there are lots of people who can probably support an organization if you say, please can you make this accessible or this accessible? But actually what Atos have is that really great perspective, the enterprise-wide perspective. How can you bed it within an organization? So we built the roadmap that we launched in May this year off the back of all of those learnings. And yeah, we've had a really good first first year of work, just coming into that first year at the end of
Excellent.
Q1. Yeah.
Just one thought on that. The 30 stakeholders who contributed to that, is there a follow-on that makes them like almost your internal accessibility council? Because one of the things we're very conscious of is that you say people do a project, an initiative, but it's not part of a bigger program. And certainly when we had BT on recently, they talked about the people internally who are visually impaired or different conditions, who they become a sounding board inside the company. Is that a sort of follow on that you're looking at?
Yeah, it is. There's two elements of it. I mean, there were people at all different levels of the organization that were within that stakeholder group. Some of them have become sponsors for this within their functions. Some of them have been pulled into specific, with specific roles within the program. And we've also launched a community of practice, and some of those people have joined this community of practice. So it's in many ways, I talk about our community of practice as being our super users, the people who really are au fait with what's available within Colt to improve accessibility and can signpost and guide other people. So we've asked a group of people to come with us on that journey. We're holding regular sessions with this group, and we're kind of learning together. Yeah.
How is that, all these efforts, you have a lot of programs, that sounds very good. Do you think that also helps attracting talent? Because I keep hearing it all the time, and it keeps surprising me because it feels like telecoms is the best place to be, right? But apparently a lot of kids don't think that way. So do you think that by making Colt more inclusive is going to help attract talent as well?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't have the stats at my fingertips, but there's lots of stats out there, lots of studies that talk about how the generations coming into the workplace now, that they are prioritizing an inclusive place to work. They want to work for cultures and places that are inclusive and where they feel welcomed. And I think that people are more uncompromising on that than ever now. So yeah, it's overall, I think it makes the workplace attractive, but it also means that, from a very basic perspective, looking at accessibility, it means that, somebody joins us who has accessibility needs, someone who is neurodiverse, for instance, they will have a better experience applying for a job and progressing through the organization if we focus on accessibility. So, there's two aspects of it as well. From a practical sense, people will have a better experience.
So I just wanted to follow up on this, and if you look at it from a gender point of view, women tend in telecoms tend to be something in the region of 20%, and then as you go up on the pyramid, it's even fewer than that. Do you have, and clearly we cannot fix it in the short term. However, do you see that in the sort of longer term, do you want to get to a 50-50 type of ratio, which reflects the population? Or should we just accept that maybe women are not all that interested in telecoms? And I know that this is general, sort of very wide question, but do you have a sense of where we might be going to?
Well, there's so much there to discuss, isn't there? I think women are interested in telecoms. I think telecoms is a great career for women, and all of the different roles that within a telecoms organization. At Colt, at the executive leadership team level, we are 50-50. We're not through all of the different levels. I think at the entry levels, it's a bit more balanced, and there's, as in with lots of organizations, it's about making sure that women are able to progress through an organization, as well as being able to attract women. Would we go for 50-50? I mean, that's not going to be fixable in the short term. I think we're at 31% now at Colt. We each year, we set targets to improve on that, and the goal is to have a more balanced workforce. In terms of where I think that organizations are going wrong, I mean, I think that this is, like we talked about before, this is about society, isn't it? Society as a whole. There are difficulties with women progressing through organizations in all different sectors, and more needs to be done to make sure that they are supported, and that decisions made in the people sphere are inclusive and equitable. So that means what we talked about right at the start. So looking at policies and people processes and making sure that they are inclusive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure, go ahead, Chris.
No, I was going to say, in many of the discussions we've been having, as soon as you put quotas in there, it's like, well, it's sort of a bit of ransom. You're held to ransom over it, and as long as it's progressing in the right direction, then and people. And I think what occurs to me is that it's a younger workforce, as you say, it's very local workforce. That the attitude of the company is important. That cultural change is just is so important. As long as and I guess with your Atos example, you've covered this, that the company's willing to put money behind it, and actually make it happen, because investing in it, and I don't think it's a massive investment, is it? But it's a vehicle for helping that change on the way. And the good thing is, of course, we know that the tools are there to make systems and websites and applications more accessible. And as long as you within, and perhaps being a B2B company helps as well. That because by definition you have to work in an ecosystem, and you're more aware of what's going on at the end of the value chain. And would you say suppliers in general are increasingly receptive to being more DEI focused?
Yeah, I would say so. We do talk to our suppliers as part of the accessibility work. We've been having conversations with our top strategic suppliers. I had one about 2 weeks ago where we just shared a lot of resources and best practices around accessibility, and it was fantastic. So and that conversation will continue. So I do think there's a lot of openness to this, definitely. Yeah.
It does occur to me that in some ways we for the last few years we've had ESG as being the focus, which is the financial metrics, and the signs that's people losing a bit of not momentum, but they're not quite as focused on it anymore. And some of the ESG based funds are perhaps not as getting as much coverage. But this is so much more. Well, this is the S bit, isn't it? This is the social bit of ESG. I'd never thought of that the S bit actually translates into DEI, for the for what we're talking about.
Yeah,
of course
DEI is a big part of it. Yeah.
And it just means it's like you say, making a company much more attractive to work for, and they've created that. Because one of the things that we've noticed, and I'm going to come back to collaboration and Teams and Zoom and all these things in a minute, but one thing obviously we know by people working at home, actually a lot of people with different impairments got excluded. Because working over these things, we've often commented that the shortcuts for muting and changing things on these they're all different for all the different applications.
Yeah.
Let alone people who are perhaps not as quite as digitally skilled in using these things. And in fact, certainly a comment I've had from Atos before is that I often talk about audio overload on these things, because I'm getting my screen reader talking to me while we're having these things going on. And Neil Milliken, you mentioned, said to me that how he got video overload, so visual overload, and I'm like going, well, what's that? Because I can't appreciate that at all, But that whole notion that what you're seeing on the screen can affect your the way you communicate and the way you interact.
Yeah.
It's just and I think his example was he created an avatar, or no, his colleague created an avatar, which actually meant he actually then couldn't communicate. It's really interesting.
Yeah, because that was like a sensory overload for him.
Yeah.
That yeah. I mean, I think that I've heard a lot of people, and a lot of people have actually asked me over the past couple of years, working from home / hybrid environment, is that more inclusive for people with disabilities or long-term
That's a
conditions?
great question.
And actually,
Yeah.
you know, broadly, it is in many ways, but I think people have been so keen to almost tick that box and announce it as it's now more inclusive because we're working from home, and it is more nuanced, isn't it? I know that there are certain assistive technologies that require such high bandwidth that that might be more difficult for them to use at home than in the office. For instance, I had a gentleman who is partially sighted and shared with me a story about how he really struggled with the pandemic because his guide dog actually needs the exercise to walk into the office. And so that there are examples of like you say, it's not a blanket improvement, and you still, whether you are working hybrid or from home or you're all in the office, you still have to be consciously and actively inclusive and use inclusion as a basis for making people decisions.
It's new. I think nuance is the right word to use, isn't it? And we're getting into sort of quite deep into the weeds here, but I think there are certain disabilities, impairments where people can't travel into work, where they struggle with it, whether it's physically because of wheelchairs or whatever, or maybe some conditions where they struggle with the travel and struggle with being in an office. So great, but it's that but we're talking because we're a technology industry, we think about the technology first rather than the people. So it's that empathy around, okay, we'd love to employ you, Monica, but we understand that these are your conditions. It's that reasonable adjustment, which people need to be aware. I think that's a really important point about that hybrid work. It's not black and white, or it is much more nuanced.
I think that we should look at the other way, also the other way around too, because I think that the crucial thing here is to be flexible. So if you need to work from home, you work from home if you can, because some jobs do not allow you to do that. If you have to go up on towers, then obviously you need to be on site. So be flexible, but some people might just need, when you look at it, they just need to have the direct personal connection that you only have in person, and that's okay too. So I think that we should just be open, back to the equity discussion we had at the beginning, is to see that not everybody has the same needs, and we should be able to accommodate them to the point that it's reasonable. And I think that just, when we said reasonable adjustments, the question is, what is reasonable? And I think that that's something that we should talk, because obviously there are some jobs, like, if you have to go up on a tower. I mean, I have fear of heights. I'm not the right person to do it. You can make any adjustment. It's just not the right thing for me to do. Just get somebody else. So
sorry.
How do you go about, and I guess this is another fair question, but how should we think about reasonable in this context? Because
I think it's a legal term, isn't it, Rachel? Is it?
We don't call it reasonable adjustments in Colt. We call them just workplace adjustments, because reasonable is a legal term, and it's quite UK centric. So we talk about workplace adjustments, and actually, many times people will self-select. Like, you wouldn't go for that job, Monica, to stand on top of the tower. You would self-select out of that opportunity because it wasn't for you. But a lot of the time what we're talking about with workplace adjustments is you know, it might be, you know, if someone's diabetic and actually they need regular breaks, and they need to make sure that they do not miss their lunch, and they need to make sure that they have somewhere to put their insulin in. You know, anything from just being a little bit more flexible to you know, understanding, you know, in some cases it might be changing the requirements of the role to support the person, or it might be that they need a piece of assistive technology like a screen reader, or something that helps them with their writing, and actually once they have that, then they're absolutely thriving. So it's quite broad what can be an adjustment, but actually I think people can sometimes panic about adjustments and assume that it's going to be very complicated. Sometimes it's just actually quite straightforward, and you know, can just be an agreement between the manager and the individual.
And what's interesting, of course, is that what you've described is all the way from in my head. I've managed to get rid of the picture of Monica up a tower. That I've managed to get rid of that now. But you know, that the thinking about your Colt's head office, you know, going in there and getting access, physical access, to people in wheelchairs or people like me that can't see their way around. You know, and it goes all the way from that through the systems, you know, through the websites, through the internal portals. And I don't know what you do in Colt, but I was talking to one telco recently who said what they've designed from the internal point of view is the home screen when you log on is almost like a Google search page. And you know, you type in where you want to go and what you want to do, rather than trying to create this unbelievable, you know, morass and mess of links and icons and stuff on a screen. And I thought actually that's so sensible, because we've cluttered up the screens when we think about the interface for people, and actually nobody likes it. You know, you ignore 80-90% of it, and you just go for the few things that you use. I mean, I think that sort of almost Google search-like approach to the intranet within a company is a really interesting idea.
Yeah, I think so too. We've launched a new intranet recently, and we know that the search function is super important. Just in terms of accessibility of apps and portals, though, that's really fascinating, I think, because many companies get this wrong. And you know, surprisingly, when I started to look into this, you know, I was shocked at the number of even consumer organizations exclude people with impairments by not having accessible websites. And I mean, I found it really, really quite shocking. And it's something that we've been doing at Colt, is building action plans to make sure that our apps and our portals are accessible. Because if you exclude people, you know, especially, you know, as if you're a B2C company, you're basically removing some of your customer base, aren't you? So you know, from that perspective, it's like, why would you do that? But there's just not enough awareness about it. There's not enough awareness about disability, inclusion, and accessibility as a whole, I think, in our society. Yeah.
Do you think it's is there anything about the telecoms industry that is makes it more difficult, or anything unique to the telecoms industry? I mean, what we've just been discussing for the last 10-15 minutes is very much, could be about any business, couldn't it? You know, about workplace adjustments and the like. And obviously we're focusing on the telecom industry. Anything about telecom? I'm not sure there is, by the way. I'm just wondering if
I'm just thinking that through. I don't know if there's anything specific to the telco industry that makes it more difficult to drive accessibility. You know, some organizations have been working on accessibility for a while. I mean, one thing I would say about the telco industry is that, well, I personally, you know, I'm probably biased, but I do think it's a great industry. It's a very collaborative industry, some great people. And in driving this piece of work at Colt, it's been like pushing on an open door. People have given the budget and they've given the time. I've had colleagues who have been so busy on other programs, but they've still said, absolutely, I'll make time for this. So yeah, it's been great to work on this.
I think you nailed it in your last comment about awareness. This is about driving awareness. And once you explain it to people and they go, oh yeah, we've been designing for a relatively narrow market, and our assumptions about people's ability to go to websites, find information, is so true. But you may not want to answer the following question. Please feel free to refuse it. But do anything around the artificial intelligence side that you see helping it? Because I'm getting involved in a lot of things now, and I'll give you my example of I used my app called Be My Eyes to take pictures of people all the time now, and it tells me, actually gives away their age quite a lot, which can be quite dangerous, but that whole AI thing about interpreting pictures, using AI to find things as a sort of enhanced search engine, and anything around AI have you got any initiatives around AI that you can tell us about?
So I'm definitely not an expert on AI, but I am fascinated on the opportunity there is with AI, especially when it comes to enhancing accessibility. There are some conversations happening at Colt, which I won't talk about for now, but I think that people are aware that it's something that can help accessibility. I know that there's lots of research going on around AI and accessibility. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question about the external facing efforts. So clearly reporting is not the same as doing it. Doing it is what matters, not reporting. But at the same time, how do you see the efforts for reporting? And also when you have, you're responding an RFP, do they ask you what is your inclusivity or, whatever sustainability policy? So on top of doing it because you feel good about doing it, is there sort of an external element to it?
Yeah, and I would say that we're not just doing it because we feel good about it. We believe it absolutely makes business sense. There are also regulatory reasons why businesses need to sit up and do more in the accessibility space. There are regulations that are being strengthened and added globally. But when it comes to reporting, I actually think the reporting is really important. Of course, you have to do the work and have the proof points and have something to report, but the reporting is important because it's important to be able to show your stakeholders internally and externally the progress, and that's a really big part of that, and being able to benchmark and compare how you're doing to others within your industry peers. And yes, in terms of your question around when we're bidding for work and RFPs and the like, absolutely. We have seen over the course of the past few years, there's much more focus on ESG from our customers. So yeah, it all links in. It all links in and all supports each other.
It does, and that's what's nice about it. And I think what we found is that certainly when I started working 40 years ago, technology to do with an individual disability was so expensive and so unique. Whereas now, because of the digital thing, actually we get more scale. And on the procurement level, certainly talking to Genesis at the MEF event recently, they said for public sector contracts, accessibility is absolutely mandatory.
Yes,
they have to show accessibility. And obviously they're in the contact center business, which they do employ quite a lot of diverse people in there. So, but I think that is it's a really important point, and I do like this notion of the evolution of ESG, and when it was CSR and a bit of DEI and so on, and it's all. I love the fact that it's shaping the culture of the company rather than
Yeah.
just shaping the financial reporting, which I think is what ESG certainly comes out as, and obviously all the greenwashing that we've seen and the like. So yeah, I'm fascinated by that. And on your AI comment, absolutely no question. And I'm sure we should ask Atos this question really. That we're beginning to see tools through generative AI to test how accessible documents are, systems are, processes are. Because it's a massive data analysis job, and that's exactly what AI and Gen AI are good at. That we can use natural language in there as well as translation. It's just it's going to keep on giving. And I like the way you basically did a plug there, Rachel, for coming back and doing this again when some of these AI projects come to fruition within Colt. So,
All right then.
Monica, over to you. Do you want to wrap us up?
Yes, we should wrap it up. And as I said, Rachel, you're always welcome to come back and share it with us. Well, thank you so much, all of you, for listening to us. And I would like to acknowledge our sponsors who are distributing our content, and we're working for presentations and panels like we're doing with the Mobile Ecosystem Forum F in Barcelona this year on February 25th, as I told you already. So thank you so much, and you can go to our webpage and see all the previous recordings we had, and so you can catch up and see all of them. Thank you so much for attending, and Rachel, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a great conversation.
Thanks, Rachel. Take care.